It's Dave Gaddis, and we're interviewing Frank Turner in the city of Plano at Plano City Hall. This is November 4th, and welcome, Frank. Thanks for joining us. So why don't we start at the beginning? When and where were you born?
I was born in Key West, Florida.
And?
And where from there?
You didn't stay in Key West.
Yeah, no, I didn't stay in Key West. My father was in the Navy, and so actually we didn't stay in Key West much after I was born, maybe 6 months, 9 months. Then we moved to Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
Lived there for a few years and then went to Coronado outside of San Diego in the Bay. Lived there for about a year, moved back to Jacksonville. And when I was about 6, we moved back to Nashville, Tennessee. Both my parents were Nashvillians, and I grew up in Nashville.
Okay. And I assume your father retired from the Navy?
He did.
And what did you do after that?
Various jobs, mainly in electronics and computer-related work.
So did you finish high school in Nashville?
I did. I went to Hillsborough High School,
Okay.
which is the southern part of Nashville, towards Brentwood and Franklin, heading south in that direction. And then I went to Lambeth College in Jackson, Tennessee.
And what did you study there?
Sociology.
And what got you interested in sociology?
That's a good question. That was back in the 60s, the late 60s. And it was all about being relevant and social causes and those types of things. And sociology seemed to have a lot of appeal in that area. So 4 years there, and then with minors in philosophy and art history and all those things that are real career builders, and decided to double down and go get a master's in sociology at University of Memphis,
Okay.
then Memphis State. And in between my first and second year in graduate school, the department head came to me and said, do you have a summer job lined up? And I said, no. He says, well, City of Memphis is looking for somebody who knows statistics and methods, and I think we got a job lined up for you. And I said, great. So went and interviewed with what was called the Policy Planning and Analysis Bureau of the City of Memphis. It reported directly to the Chief Operating Officer. Memphis is a strong mayor form of government, and the Chief Operating Officer is the equivalent to a city manager in a strong mayor form of government. And we were doing work planning for the pending passage of the Community Development Block Grant Program, selecting neighborhoods for neighborhood revitalization. So I was doing neighborhood profiles and coming up with the methodology for the selection process.
And this is when you were still in school?
Still in school.
Okay.
I continued through that summer and actually continued working for them through the fall of that year. I did a teaching assistantship in the spring, and looking over options of going on and getting a doctorate or doing things. My wife persuaded me that perhaps a job would be in order. So I got talking back to my friends in Memphis, and they said, well, gosh, we don't have any openings, but we know of a job doing something very similar to what you were doing in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we can line you up an interview. So, great. So drove over to Knoxville and interviewed and was hired on the spot, which was great. And asked them what the job title was. They said, you're a city planner. So there began a 40-year career.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, do you remember what your salary was?
Yes, I do. I do. My first salary was $12,500 a year.
Okay.
And that would have been in 1975.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any professors at Memphis or Lambeth that were particularly influential as mentors? Or?
Yeah, actually, quite a few. I developed very strong relationships with, and again, my area of study was principally related to urban studies and and urban problems and those types of things. So it was a natural progression, and the research methods and statistics and stuff were a strong beginning point for developing a planning degree. Studied a lot about human ecology, and of course the Chicago School and all the kind of planning theory that was a backbone of planning science was part of the sociology curriculum as well. So there was a relationship there.
I may not have told you this, but actually a couple of my high school classmates went to Lambeth.
So
I am familiar with the school. Is it still around? I feel like
Yeah.
they had some financial.
They did. The school got into significant financial trouble. It was an old school. It was originally, I think it was founded in about the mid-1830s, so it was fairly old. But the state of Tennessee came to its rescue, and it is now part of the University of Memphis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a fresh new city planner in Knoxville. What kinds of things were you doing there?
Well, the first stuff was again related to community development block grant, neighborhood revitalization, doing neighborhood plans, writing the housing element, 701 stuff, requirements. Yeah, that was the initial work. Years later, a couple of years later, I got into drafting the new comprehensive plan for the city of Knoxville. And about year 4, year 5 that I've been there, 5th year I guess it was, I became the planning director for the city. Or actually, it was the Knox County Metropolitan Planning Commission.
Okay.
We have a different setup for the 4 large cities in Tennessee, and they actually have a commission form where they're funded by the city and county governments of the core city and then the county. And they work much like a council of governments, having jurisdiction over the entire county, but they do handle planning and zoning and transportation planning, the MPO functions, all of those types of things. Probably about a third of our budget was federal grants related to water quality and transportation and so on.
Yeah, I think I saw that you did some 208 planning.
Connected with them, yeah, with it, absolutely.
I think there were a lot of us of that age that
Yeah.
were 208 planners at one
Right.
time. And so, how long did you stay in Knoxville?
I was there for just a little over 9 years, and through a headhunter, I came to be in Plano, Texas.
Okay. I was going to ask you how you made that transition.
Interesting progression here. Knoxville was a great city, a beautiful city, and really enjoyed being there. But Knoxville is a very conservative community, not a particularly fast-growing community. And I really thought that I needed to broaden my experience. So I started job searching different places and actually came to interview for the planning director position at the city of Arlington. And another person that was probably on your interview list, Bruce McClendon, was in the same applicant pool. Bruce got the job. I went back to Knoxville. And a few months later, the headhunter that was handling the position for Arlington calls me and says, "What do you know of Plano, Texas?" And I said, "I know where it is, but other than that, I don't know much more about Plano." He said, "Well, if you would like to be included in the interview pool, I can make a slot for you." So I'll make the story short, but I came over here a few weeks later and interviewed, and I tell you, it was shocking at first because I was used to a much larger community, much larger staff. I remember visiting the offices of the planning department, and they were tiny. Actually, the director's office didn't even have a window. My office in Knoxville was sitting way above the Tennessee River. I looked down at the Tennessee River, could see hills with dogwoods and everything in the background, and on a clear day you could see the Smoky Mountains. And so it was a little bit different coming to Plano. But one thing that I could see was this town was blowing and going. I mean, growth was just phenomenal. And it wasn't just the residential growth that was going on. Plano was emerging as an employment center. Frito-Lay was under construction. EDS had assembled the land to become Legacy. You could already see the path for where Plano was going, and I said, you know, I want to be a part of that. So wound up here.
Remember the population of Plano when you came here?
Yeah, it was just right around 90,000.
Okay.
Yeah, today it's around 270,000. And the big change during that period, because Plano was still biased towards residential growth and development at that point. But today there are about 150,000 Plano-based jobs, so we're actually a net importer of labor. More people come to work in Plano every day than leave Plano to work somewhere else.
So you were planning director for how long before you moved on up?
Oh gosh, I don't remember the exact year, but I've been here just over 30 years, and a little more than half of that time I've been deputy city manager. The rest of the time was planning director or director of development services. We went through some retitling on and so now my responsibilities include most of the development related functions, well, really all of them, and then I have some other departments that are somewhat related, like the health department, for example, animal services, in addition to all the development functions.
I feel sorry for you for the animal services.
We've got an excellent animal services department. I've got code enforcement too. Code is always a challenge.
Right. Well, while you were planning director, were there any particular projects or developments that you were particularly proud of?
Yeah.
Alluded to a couple of them.
It was interesting. Another long-serving Texas planner, Bob Buffington, is actually the person that brought me over here for the interview and stuff. He had been the planning director in Plano. And boy, as Bob described the town, it was just a cakewalk. You know, everything was running perfectly and so on. And so I went back to Knoxville to get my things in order and finish out, a few weeks there to transition out. And I had a phone call from Bob. He says, can you be here next weekend? And I said, well, I hadn't really planned on that. He says, what's going on, Bob? And Bob says, well, we need you here for a council retreat. I said, okay. What's going on, Bob? He said, well, the city council just declared a zoning moratorium. And we're having a retreat to figure out how to get out from under this zoning moratorium. Plano was growing so quickly at that point in time, and speculative zoning was just rampant. And the council had just called timeout. I mean, they really were frustrated with where they were going and how they were doing things. So my first mission was try to make some order and sense out of that. And within 60 days, we had a plan to come out from under the moratorium, and part of that plan included writing a new comprehensive plan for the city. There were other things, other steps and measures. So I was real proud of that work over the next 3 years that we spent on the planning effort and redoing regulations and processes and stuff. We came out of it on the other side tired and worn out, but we had accomplished a lot and setting a new framework for moving forward.
Okay. And then how did the advancement to deputy city manager come about? Was it something that you wanted to do, or did it just fall on your lap? Or?
Well, it's always wise not to decline added responsibility when it's offered to you. And as I've been here through the years, I've accepted additional responsibility initially for transportation planning and traffic, and then civil engineering, eventually public works, and so on. So it was more of a creation of a position through addition of duties than anything else. One of our deputies had retired, and the city manager came to me and said, "I'd like to move you up." So I said, "Okay."
And who was the manager at the time?
Tom Muhlenbeck.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thinking back over the years, are there any particular mentors that have kind of helped guide your career that you think of, recall?
You know, there have been many associates and people that I've learned from through the years. Back in Knoxville, for example, Robin McNulty kind of took me under his wing, and he'd show me a lot. George Seiler, Don Gilson, Sue Adams, all of those people in my early career, as I had not been trained as a planner, set out to train me as a planner, and made sure I had plenty to read, and as well as coaching and mentoring in that early period. And I felt like I was in graduate school a lot of the time. I really did. But it was really good. Then coming over here, of course, adjusting to a new legal environment, new statutory environment, although it's not drastically different than Tennessee. Annexation law and some other things are significantly different, but zoning and subdivision authority is much like standard act material. But Bob Buffington certainly was very influential in the early stages of the career. Had a great working relationship with Jerry Hebert. Dennis Wilson was another person who was planning director of Dallas at the time. Certainly he was very good in offering his time and advice to me. You know, all the people who were in the Texas chapter have always been close connections and people that I've relied on, picked up the phone and said, you know, how are you handling this? You know, whether it was Craig Farmer or Mark Guy, I can just go on down the list, especially the people here that are here in the Metroplex. All have always been willing to give to each other their time and talents, and excel at plagiarism, and so I look for their examples of good ordinances and ways to do things.
Well, so we brought up APA. When did you first get involved in APA?
From the beginning in Knoxville, yeah. Was member of AIP, and then, of course, when the first written exam was offered for AICP, I took it.
Okay.
And yeah, up there on the wall, there's the, it actually is another one. That's the FAICP, but somewhere around here is the membership of the original creation of AICP.
Okay.
A charter member, you know, which I'm sure you are too.
So were you an active member in the Tennessee chapter?
Yes, yeah. In the Tennessee chapter, we had obviously Tennessee's not nearly the as large in terms of membership and stuff, but we had good chapters in for the state, but also active groups in Knoxville. All the big cities had very active organizations. Knoxville was unusually endowed with a lot of planners because of the Tennessee Valley Authority and our Council of Governments, and of course the Graduate School of Planning at the University of Tennessee was there. So there was a lot of folks to mix with.
Okay. Did you take any leadership role back in the Tennessee chapter?
No, I participated in lots of activities, but I didn't hold any of the offices.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you came down here, you got back involved in the North Central section?
Yeah.
Or actually, it was probably just, well, the North Central section.
It was North Central section. We had,
Fort Worth.
right, Midwest had not been divided at that point. Yeah, Lucy Stewart was a person who wanted to make sure I got involved, and I did. Gosh, right from the get-go, I guess about 2 years in, I became section president or director, and then a few years later, became the Texas chapter president.
Okay, meteoric rise.
Meteoric rise, yeah.
Do you remember-
CPAT director.
Yeah. Was CPAT director before chapter president or after?
You know, I'd have to look. I think it was CPAP May actually followed.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, while you were chapter president, do you remember any of the issues or activities that stood out in your mind?
You know, what really strikes me during that period was starting in 1987, the Texas legislature, they had a lot of concerns with planning. And so we faced first on impact fees, but then vesting followed shortly thereafter, and annexation battles and so on. And so I got real involved in the legislature on all those issues. Had the good fortune of working with you on the comprehensive planning legislation, getting it introduced and passed. We also ran through some minor amendments to the subdivision enabling statute.
Actually, I think I just showed you a picture, which was probably the procurement statute amendment that was made.
Mm-hmm.
Allow planning to not be a bid activity.
That's right. Yeah. So we carried through a number of good things, but we also fended off a number of bad things. One of the ironic twists on impact fees, for example, that really came out of the Texas home builders, who were feeling that they were being taken advantage of by cities that were charging water and sewer and various other types of impact fees, and that the money wasn't necessarily being spent for water or sewer or whatever. It was going into the city's general fund. So they began looking for legislative support. They introduced a bill, had a bill introduced for them. And Jim Duncan and Terry Morgan and a number of people. I was a little bit on the sidelines on the first go-around, but the first impact fee bill was passed shortly, and I think it was in the 87 session. It, ironically, to the, I think, builder's surprise, actually was a guidebook to how to do impact fees. And shortly after that, many cities, particularly in this area, adopted impact fees. Plano did. Plano had what was called a sewer and water availability fee prior to that. And after the act passed, we passed impact fees, and the fees went up by about 3 times. And every city around here did the same. So be careful what you ask for.
And you've stayed involved in the legislature pretty much since then?
Yeah, this last session I pulled back some. Mark Israelson, who works for the city, is carrying most of the load on legislation. But depending on what's introduced, if it's in the areas of economic development, land use, those types of things, subdivision, transportation, I'll probably get involved in it. Yeah.
Okay. I seem to recall one of the other things that you did as your term as chapter president was the board of advisors. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, you're talking about when we look to the outside folks, and yes, Kay Granger and several other people we invited in to at least meet with us when we were having the annual conference, and to really provide us some ideas on how we might be of better service to the communities and political leadership in particular. But one of the things that I felt very strongly about APA, and have been somewhat successful from time to time in, is that we need to talk to people other than ourselves. We have a tendency to go to our conferences or in our papers and stuff to be somewhat of an incestuous organization, in that we only talk to our brethren and sisters in the organization and not to the greater outside world. So the involvement of the development community and attorneys and consultants and all the people who are involved in the land development process, I think is very critical for planners to do their job well, to really understand particularly the development process from all sides. So the Board of Advisors was a part of that outreach and looking for new ideas and ways to be effective.
Okay. Anything else you can think of? As chapter president, were big issues or?
Big issues. Well, you know, it's such a broad state. I mean, it's huge. And as chapter president, I made an effort to visit each area of the state, every section. And that was really enlightening because you tend to see the world with where you sit and obviously the needs around the state and how we view things and the problems that we face are significantly different. And that was really enlightening. I mean, you know, from El Paso to Houston, you know, it was, I went to Post, Texas once as a part of chapter president responsibilities. The Lubbock section was having their meeting in Post.
There was any place big enough for Post to?
Yeah. So that was really interesting because, you know, as I say, we're very broad and diverse, and yet we work very effectively as a statewide organization. We've held joint conferences with other states on occasion, and still, even at this last conference in Frisco here, we had people from Louisiana and Oklahoma and several other states that were visiting.
Well, one of the duties as chapter president is to participate in the chapter president's council on a national level. What are your memories of that?
Well, the CPC is or call themselves, an interesting group because it is meant to be advisory to the board to give a more grassroots, here's what the organization is doing at the local level. At times, CPC has been kind of a shadow government, feeling that you know, that they needed to take a stronger stance on policies and programs that APA is undertaking and let them know where the rubber meets the road, you know. So the debate at CPC meetings has always been kind of interesting, you know. It's a parent-child relationship there that is not altogether respected, just like most families, you know.
But they do throw good parties, right?
They do. And, you know, the friends that you make through CPC are for life. And every time you go back to a national conference, you know, you see, you know, all the chapter presidents that were there when you were there. And I think the group that I was with has really clung together more than most. I mean, they've always been very, very active in seeing each other and correspond and emails, and Connie Cooper is largely responsible for holding that together. I mean, she keeps her little network and emails, blasts, and all those types of things that keep us all involved.
Okay. Did you ever have any aspirations for higher office in APA? Or?
Well, I did run for the board once, and I lost out dear Florida, the sweet Florida, and Sergio beat me out by, I think I heard that it was less than 20 votes, but I don't know who. But after that, I never sought to run again.
Okay. And you mentioned the City Planners Association of Texas, CPAT. You were quite active in that.
Yes.
At that time, it was a separate organization.
Yeah, it was. And CPAT actually predates APAs in Texas. CPAT was an affiliate of the Texas Municipal League. Each discipline, so to speak, within city government has a representative on the TML board or an affiliate organization. So BOAT, for example, the Building Official Association of Texas is another. And they're ones for public works and law enforcement and fire and just libraries and so on. Well, CPAT was the TML affiliate. And it had really been active through the years. And from TML's perspective, CPAT was the planning organization. APA, well, they're a fine professional organization and the like, but when we go to ask a policy question of how planners are being affected in the state, we ask CPAT. So it was very important for APA and CPAT to have a strong relationship and good communication in order for APA to have influence on CPAT's policy stance.
And CPAT basically became the legislative arm of APA.
Yes, yes. There was always a desire to fold in and create one. Part of our technical difficulty in doing this was that TML wanted its affiliates to be all municipal employees, and CPAT was all municipal employees. Of course, APA is broader than that, with academic members, consulting, private sector members, even interested lay people who are part of the organization. So creating that relationship where TML would recognize APA as being the affiliate was something we had to work through.
Well, we touched on CPC having good parties, but the Texas chapters had some pretty good shindigs too.
Well, by golly, we have.
Any of those stand out in your mind, or funny stories you remember?
You know, some of them are rather foggy. No, I will say planners know how to throw a party, and of course the state conferences have always provided a great opportunity for entertainment and fun as well as education. And so I know during my reign as chapter president, I was able to get Marshall Ball, and I was able to get Gary P. Nunn to come and make performances for our conference.
I was going to bring those two up because one of your avocations is music. You seem to have developed some relationships with some folks.
Well, I do like Texas, the regional music, the country, particularly the progressive country music that was so popular up through the 70s and 80s. And had opportunity to see lots of people and tour around the state and listen to it in different locations, from Lubbock to Austin to Corpus to Houston to here. So it's always been good.
And you may not remember this story, but I'll tell what I know, and you can jump in when you. My recollection is that Gary P. Nunn played at our Corpus conference.
Mm-hmm. He did.
And later that evening, there was a bunch of us in a hotel room just hanging out, and we have a few guitar players in the group, including Jeff Table and Cameron Walker. And Jeff started playing London's Homesick Blues, and you excused yourself and came back with
But Gary P. Nunn, yeah. No, that was actually in Austin. We were that this happened, and it was I think it was a state meeting, and I'm personal friends with Gary, and so I'd asked him to drop by. We'd been talking on the phone and stuff, and said, "Well, we're over at the Arboretum and stuff. Come on by. We'll have a drink and stuff." So he did. He showed up, and I knew Table, and then we're down at the other end of the hall, and Jeff looked pretty funny when we walked in the room.
But he was a trooper. He kept on playing. So.
He did, and Gary enjoyed it.
You recall any other humorous events?
Oh, gosh. Not that I should probably tell.
Well, I won't bring up you and I in the French Quarter.
Oh.
And what's his name losing his cell phone?
Yes, we had one good friend and associate that left his cell phone in an inappropriate place and had to retrieve it the next day.
And couldn't understand why he wasn't there anymore. That was Tom West.
I didn't say.
And it was an Esri phone that he lost.
Telling all the stories now.
Well, you belong to some other professional organizations, such as?
I do. I have been very active in the Urban Land Institute. Not as long as APA, but pretty close. I've been a ULI member for 25 years, and serve on the executive committee of the North Texas Board. Been active in the product councils of ULI, national product councils. Currently serve as chair of mission advancement for North Texas on ULI. It's a good organization, and I really encourage planners to take part in ULI programs and become a member. The cost is not that bad for a public sector associate membership, and I think their publications are frequently on the bookshelves of planners, and for a very good reason. They're a good research organization, and they their staff in particular has an affinity for APA and planners and stuff. There's a lot of cross-fertilization that takes place in those circles. Another organization that I've been active with is a smaller local-based organization, the Greater Dallas Planning Council. It's a great organization. It is composed of certainly a wide array of professionals that are design related and construction development related, but a lot of civic and political leadership in the community have been parts of members of Greater Dallas Planning Council. And it's been a great forum for discussion and ideas, and as well as policy initiatives. We put on a series of symposiums that I'm proud of, the Metromorphosis, in which we dealt with some pretty good subjects and had some fairly notable speakers come in through that organization. So been proud of that relationship.
I seem to recall you were active also in the Southwest Legal Foundation at one time.
Yes, I was very active in Southwest Legal. I'm sorry that it is no longer. It was never a money maker for the organization, and eventually had to dissolve. But gosh, I got to spend a lot of time with some nationally, if not internationally, recognized attorneys across the United States, and Bob Freilich got to be good friends with him, for an example, and served as vice chair, for probably 10 years on that organization. More recently, I've been getting involved with CNU. We're looking forward to their national meeting being here next year in the spring. And don't fully drink the Kool-Aid on CNU. I drink it light. But
I was surprised that you said you drank.
But there are principles there that I certainly have embraced in transit-oriented development, things that we've been doing in downtown, Legacy Town Center, and the like. I'm not a staunch form-based code person. I like form-based light, so to speak. But nevertheless, I have a lot of respect for many of their members and things that they're doing. So I think it's good to interact with a broad array of perspectives and disciplines and organizations. I think that's very important for planners.
I'm going to backtrack a little. One of the things that I recall that you did while either with CPAT or with APA was bringing a shorter version of the short course to the TML conference. Does that ring a bell? Oh,
it does, yeah. And I don't know that it's being followed every year like we did for a while.
It has been in quite a few years, but I wanted to let you know that there talks about doing it again.
Yeah, I hope so, because elected officials need the training, number one, as we all need training and learning and stuff. But they also need that opportunity to have that dialogue outside of their own city, so that they get fresh ideas, fresh exposure, can ask questions that maybe they didn't want to ask at home, but now that they're away in another city and with another group, they feel free to go ahead and ask that question about, is it really okay to? and here's some very good advice. I wish we did more training programs. I wish we did training programs for people who were wanting to serve on planning commissions, and we're getting prepared. We frequently do with training programs like the short course at the conference for people who have become planning commissioners. But I think there's a lot of good training there for homeowner presidents, all sorts of organizations to get involved, know better how to affect change in their community, understand the process more clearly as to what can and can't be done.
I seem to also recall that you also got some planning training for the Texas City Management Association.
Yeah, we've been trying to creep in there, and they're continuing to have those discussions about how APA can create a stronger relationship with ICMA. Again, at the staff level, there's a fair amount of interaction in between the APA staff and ICMA staff. As you know, the Green Bible is published by ICMA and many other publications related to municipal functions, but planning discipline in particular. So there's a natural relationship. But I found through the years that many city managers don't fully appreciate the skills and abilities of planners and don't call on them. They think, they're the folks that handle the plats and the site plans and the zoning cases, but they don't think about how those skills could be used in a different context to help city managers in doing their job.
Well, early on we talked about who were mentors to you. Can you think of some proteges, people that you have mentored that stand out in your mind?
I have a long list of them, and that's one of the good things that when you have a state conference and you go there and you see all the people who at one time or another were an employee of the city of Plano and have gone on to serve in a higher role and function in a different community. And gosh, they're all over this state, from Teresa O'Donnell, who's in Dallas, John Lettler in Frisco. I mean, they're all over the state, people who have worked at one time or another with us.
You have any particular advice for young planners?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things. I mean, I think it's important, unless you are just really solely devoted to a specialty, to remain a generalist. Seek knowledge in all areas. There's some people who are absolutely devoted to environmental science or geographic information systems, or you can go on down the list. We have so much specialty areas, historic preservation, so on. But if they wish to take on greater responsibility, if they want to grow in their career, I think remaining a generalist is fairly important for most planners. There are some that certainly don't aspire in that direction or what have you, but for most of us, that's where our real strength comes.
So we've covered a lot of territory. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't? Any particular accomplishment or opinion? Or?
The one thing that we were talking about this at the conference. We were on a panel together, I think, and one of the things that city planners, their perspective on the world in comparison to city managers or many other people. If you ask a city manager, how's the city doing? The city manager thinks of the city organization, the government. He goes, oh, the budget's fine, this is fine, our, CIP program is moving along, we've got police and fire and blah, blah. You ask a city planner how the city is doing, and he thinks of the city. He doesn't think of city government immediately. He thinks of, the full social, environmental, economic, and physical dimensions of the community. And that's really our strength, is the comprehensiveness and the depth of our understanding of how, this social, economic, and physical environment work together. And I hope that that'll always be our real strength of this organization and profession.
Well, you've had a long career, approaching 40 years. So
Yeah.
you're probably going to retire in the next few. You got plans for after retirement?
Well, I may retire in a few years, but I'll have to continue working. My wife wouldn't let me stay at home. So I'm certain that I will stay active for hopefully many more years.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for participating with us. Thanks.
Well, thank you, David.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay.